The air of Ghana in 1979 was thick with frustration, poverty, and fear. Corruption had eaten deep into the fabric of society, and even the soldiers who once served with pride were now filled with anger and despair. The once proud nation that had dreamt of being the Black Star of Africa was gasping for breath. The markets were empty, salaries unpaid, and hope was slipping away. In the barracks, whispers of discontent grew louder every night. Junior officers, weary of hunger and humiliation, spoke in hushed tones about justice, equality, and the future of their beloved country. Amidst these restless souls stood a young flight lieutenant named Jerry John Rawlings. Rawlings was not born into wealth or power, but he carried an unshakable sense of justice within him. His frustration mirrored that of the ordinary Ghanaian who saw the system failing day after day. The ruling Supreme Military Council, led by General Fred Akufo, had inherited a nation drowning in economic collapse and moral decay. The people no longer trusted their leaders, and soldiers who risked their lives for the nation were left unpaid. Hunger and bitterness spread through the ranks like wildfire. Rawlings, unable to endure the silence any longer, decided to act. On the 15th of May 1979, he and a group of junior officers attempted a coup to overthrow the corrupt regime. But the attempt failed. Rawlings and his comrades were captured, beaten, and brought before a military tribunal. He stood tall in the courtroom, his face defiant despite the bruises. When asked why he attempted to overthrow the government, his voice was steady and powerful. He did not deny it. Instead, he accused the very government judging him of crimes far greater than his. "I take full responsibility," he said. "My men should be freed. I alone am to blame. But know this, what I did was not for ambition, but for the soul of Ghana." His words struck the hearts of many. The trial, intended to break him, turned him into a hero in the eyes of the ordinary people. Rawlings was sentenced to death. As he sat in his dark cell, awaiting execution, soldiers across the country whispered his name. They spoke not just of the man, but of the courage he represented. The system had failed them, but perhaps, they thought, this man could bring change. Then, on the night of June 3rd, something extraordinary happened. A group of junior officers, led by Major Boki John, stormed the prison. They broke through the gates, overpowered the guards, and freed Rawlings. The moment he stepped out into the rain, history shifted course. Rawlings was taken to the national radio station. At dawn, the people of Ghana woke to his voice over the airwaves. "This is Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings," he declared. "I have been released by the junior ranks of the armed forces, who can no longer tolerate the corruption destroying our beloved country. Let all soldiers report to Burma camp. Let justice begin." The city erupted. Soldiers and civilians flooded the streets, shouting, crying, and praying. The oppressed had found their voice. The revolution had begun. Gunfire echoed across Accra as loyalists of the old regime tried to resist. Among them was General Neville O'Darty Wellington, who fought to suppress the uprising but fell in battle. The old order collapsed within hours. By the morning of June 4th, the Supreme Military Council was no more. The Armed Forces Revolutionary Council, led by Rawlings, now held power. Ghana stood at the edge of transformation, trembling with both hope and fear. The revolution that followed was swift, brutal, and unforgettable. The people demanded justice for years of corruption and oppression. Senior officers, politicians, and businessmen were rounded up and tried for corruption and abuse of power. Among those executed were former heads of state, Generals Fred Akufo, Ignatius Kutu Acheampong, and Akwasi Afrifa. Firing squads echoed across military barracks, and the earth of Ghana drank deeply of its sons. For some, it was justice long overdue. For others, It was vengeance cloaked in righteousness. Markets were raided, corrupt officials stripped of their wealth, and a house-cleaning campaign swept through the nation. Rawlings addressed the nation with passion and conviction. He spoke not as a dictator, but as a man who believed he was cleansing the soul of his country. He called on Ghanaians to work hard, to rebuild, to believe again in the principles of honesty and sacrifice. He said, "Let us not think of revenge, but of redemption. We must cleanse ourselves to be free." His words stirred a broken people to dream again. Yet the pain of the executions haunted many families. The months that followed were filled with both progress and chaos. The Armed Forces Revolutionary Council ruled until September 1979, overseeing elections that brought Dr. Hilla Limann to power. In a rare act of humility, Rawlings handed over the government peacefully to the new civilian administration. But Ghana's wounds were deep, and the old corruption soon crept back. Rawlings watched in silence for 2 years before the weight of disappointment drove him to act once more. On December 31, 1981, he led another coup, overthrowing Liman's government and promising once again to save the nation from greed and betrayal. Rawlings ruled Ghana for nearly 2 decades afterward, first as a military leader and later as an elected president. His rule brought discipline and reform, but also controversy and pain. To some, he was the savior who restored Ghana's dignity. To others, he was a man who believed too much in his own righteousness. Yet no one could deny his courage or the indelible mark he left on Ghana's history. Years later, when Rawlings passed away in 2020, the nation mourned him deeply. People remembered the fire in his eyes, the conviction in his voice, and the storm he unleashed on June 4, 1979. That day remains one of the most defining moments in Ghana's history. A day when ordinary soldiers and citizens rose against corruption, when fear gave way to fury, and when a young pilot's defiance changed the destiny of a nation. The June 4th revolution remains both a wound and a lesson. It reminds Ghanaians of the cost of silence and the price of justice. It stands as a testament to the power of conscience and the danger of unchecked power. Generations after, people still gather each year to light candles and remember the men who died for what they believed was right. Some say it was a cleansing fire. Others call it a storm of blood. But in the heart of Ghana, the echoes of that day still linger, whispering of courage, sacrifice, and the eternal struggle for freedom and integrity. The story of June 4th is not just the story of Jerry Rawlings or his comrades. It is the story of a people who rose from despair and dared to demand better. It is the cry of a nation that refused to be broken. And though decades have passed, the flame that burned on that fateful day still flickers in the hearts of those who believe that justice, though harsh, is the path to true freedom.